Letting Go, The Pathway of Surrender by Dr. David Hawkins, Video 4, Chapter 3 in this brand new series coming up right after this. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Yoel Presents YouTube channel. I'm Yoel and very grateful to have you. Very grateful to those who have subscribed since the last video. And for those who haven't, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so that you don't miss a future video. It also helps me to continue to produce videos just like this one. So today we are going to continue with our series on Dr. David Hawkins' landmark book, Letting Go, The Pathway of Surrender. I always have to check that. My memory isn't what it once was. Letting Go, The Pathway of Surrender. And what we're doing is, for those who are just coming to this video for the first time in the series and haven't watched the previous videos, first of all, watch the previous video, starting from video 1, of course, which is on the preface, and work your way through. This is already video 4, which is chapter 3. And what we're doing is we're reading the entire chapter, and then I'm providing my insights as I read from time to time, as well as providing a brief summary, somewhat brief summary after reading through the chapter. And the reason I'm doing that is not just to be another sort of Audible competitor or anything like that, but more so that you can hear the words of Dr. Hawkins for yourself, okay? Rather than me just paraphrasing everything and giving you lessons. I've done that for other videos, and I feel like they weren't as valuable as they could be if you actually had read the book yourself. And because I know that most of you probably do not have this book, second best is to actually listen to it. You can also listen as you're going about your chores, doing your work. I don't expect you to stare at my pretty face the entire video. I've made that cheesy joke in every one of these videos. So you can go about doing what you're doing as you listen. And of course, I do recommend, I do suggest that you do buy the book. And in my previous videos and in this video as well, I will link you to the Amazon page where you can get the book. I don't get any, as of the date of this recording in June 2025 anyways, I don't get any personal compensation for that. Maybe one day when this channel gets big enough, notice that I said when, I'm thinking abundantly, I didn't say if, then I will have a sort of affiliate link, assuming those are still around by then. But for the present moment anyways, I don't get anything from it other than wanting you to have this book so you can read it on your own time. So without further ado, let's jump into chapter 3, and then we'll get into a summary afterwards. It is a bit of a long chapter. All the chapters are somewhat long, so that's why I'm saying go about doing whatever work you're doing, and you can have this running in the background so that you can listen to what I have to say while you accomplish other parts of your day. Chapter 3, The Anatomy of Emotions. For those who are following along with the book, by the way, this is page 26 rather, of the book. There are numerous complicated psychologies of the human emotions. They often involve considerable symbology and references to mythology, and they are based on hypotheses that are hotly debated. As a result, there are various schools of psychotherapy with their different aims and methods. Simplicity is one of the earmarks of truth. I love that. I've talked a lot about simplicity in previous videos. Simplicity, I think it was Steve Jobs who adapted, was it Descartes? Somebody who had said simplicity is the purest form of sophistication, and isn't that the truth? Simplicity. So Hawkins says here, simplicity is one of the earmarks of truth, and so we will describe a simple, workable, testable map of the emotions that can be verified by subjective experience as well as by objective testing. By the way, one of the things I love about this book as well is that if you're more scientific minded, as Dr. David Hawkins was as well, then he gets into the scientific data surrounding this technique of letting go and surrendering. For those like me who are less scientific, it's easy to understand and simple so that you can appreciate it even without being more scientific oriented. So there's something for everybody in this book. Okay, so the next chapter, same page of chapter 3, not chapter, the next heading is the goal of survival. Whichever psychology is studied reveals that the primary human goal, superseding all others, is survival. Every human desire seeks to ensure one's personal survival and the survival of one's identified groups, such as family, loved ones, and country. Humans fear, most of all, the loss of the capacity to experience. To that end, people are interested in the survival of the body because they believe that they are the body, and therefore they need the body to experience their existence. Because people view themselves as separate and limited, they are stressed by their sense of lack. It is common for humans to look outside of themselves for the satisfaction of their needs. This leads them to experience themselves as vulnerable because they are insufficient unto themselves. The mind is therefore a survival mechanism, and its method of survival is primarily the use of emotions. Thoughts are engendered by the emotions, and eventually emotions become shorthand for thoughts. Thousands and even millions of thoughts can be replaced by a single emotion. Emotions are more basic and primitive than mental processes. Reason is the tool of the mind that the mind uses to achieve its emotional end. When used by the intellect, the basic underlying emotion is usually unconscious or at least out of awareness. When the underlying emotion is forgotten or ignored and not experienced, people are unaware of the reason for their actions, and they develop all kinds of plausible reasons. In fact, they frequently do not know what they are doing and why they are doing. He actually puts it the reverse: why they are doing and what they are doing. There is a simple way to become conscious of the underlying emotional goal behind any activity through use of the question, what for? With each answer, what for, is asked again and again until the basic feeling is uncovered. An example would be the following. A man wants a new Cadillac. His mind gives all the logical reasons, but logic doesn't really explain it. So he asks himself, what do I want the Cadillac for? Well, he says, it is to achieve status, recognition, respect, and solid citizen success status. Again, what do I want the status for? Respect and approval from others, he might say, and to ensure that respect. Again, what do I want respect and approval for? To have that feeling of security. Again, what do I want security for? To feel happy. The continual question, what for, reveals that basically there are feelings of insecurity, unhappiness, and lack of fulfillment. Every activity or desire will reveal that the basic goal is to achieve a certain feeling. There are no other goals than to overcome fear and achieve happiness. Emotions are connected with what we believe will ensure our survival, not with what actually will. Emotions themselves are actually the cause of the basic fear that drives everyone to seek security constantly. I love that what for exercise, by the way. I go to the gym pretty much every day, and sometimes I ask myself, what am I doing this for? And it's a very valuable question to ask. Am I doing it for ego? Am I doing it for health? Is it both? And what's underlying all of that? So the what for exercise, I can tell you from personal experience, is very powerful. The scale of emotions. For simplicity and clarity, we will utilize the scale of emotions that corresponds with the level of consciousness. Levels, plural. A thorough presentation of consciousness levels, their scientific basis, and practical applications is found in Power versus Force, the Hidden Determinants of Human Behavior. And that's Hawkins, 1995 and 2012. I've mentioned Power versus Force before. That's actually the first book of Hawkins that I read, which led me to this book. And he's got many others that I want to read and maybe one day profile on this channel. Briefly, everything emits energy, either positive or negative. Intuitively, we know the difference between a positive person, friendly, genuine, considerate, and the negative one, greedy, deceitful, hateful. The energy of Mother Teresa was obviously different from the energy of Adolf Hitler. Most people's energy is somewhere in between the two. Music, places, books, animals, intentions, and all of life emit an energy that can be calibrated as to its essence and its degree of truth. Like goes to like. The different energies constellate in attractor patterns or levels of consciousness. The map of consciousness, see Appendix A, and if I don't forget, I will try and link you to somewhere online where they have the map of consciousness. Basically, let me see if I could put this towards the camera over here. This is the appendix, the map of consciousness. Okay, I've got my notes over here, so I'm blocking some of them. But basically, it goes from the level of God view of self, life view is, level is enlightenment, and he talks about the log, which is the energy level, the emotion, which is ineffable, and the process is pure consciousness, all the way to the bottom, which is despising, miserable, shameful. It emits at 20 of the scale of scientific data. Again, you have to read Power versus Force to really understand that. Humiliation and elimination are the emotional and processes surrounding that. Again, without having a full context, it's a bit hard to understand that, but that's basically what's contained in this level of consciousness, the map of consciousness, rather, and I will try and link you to that so you can see it for yourself. Anyway, back to the book. The map of consciousness, see Appendix A, as I just showed you, provides a linear logarithmic view of this non-linear energetic terrain. Each level of consciousness or attractor pattern is calibrated on a logarithmic scale of energetic power ranging from 1 to 1,000. So I said the bottom was ranging at 20, if you remember. The level of full enlightenment, 1,000 at the top of the map, represents the highest level of attainable in the human realm. It is the energy of Jesus Christ, the Buddha, the Krishna. The level of shame, 20, is at the bottom, close to death, representing bare survival. The level of courage, 200, is the critical point that marks the shift from negative to positive energy. Okay, so if you're looking at this appendix, that's where I marked my line at the level of courage. That's when we go from the bottom, negativity, to the top of positivity. So back to the book, the level of courage is the critical point that marks the shift from negative to positive energy. It is the energy of integrity, being truthful, empowerment, and having the capacity to cope. The levels of consciousness below courage are destructive, whereas the levels above it are life supportive. A simple muscle test reveals the difference. Negative stimuli below 200 instantly weaken the muscle, and positive stimuli above 200, again, 200 is courage, instantly strengthen the muscle. True power strengthens, force weakens. Hence the book, Power versus Force. Above the level of courage, people seek us out because we give energy to them, power, and we have goodwill toward them. Below the level of courage, people avoid us because we take energy from them, force, and we want to use them for our own material or emotional needs. Here we delineate the basic scale, starting from the higher energies down to the lower. Peace, 600. This is experienced as perfection, bliss, effortlessness, and oneness. It is a state of non-duality, beyond separateness and beyond the intellect, as in the peace that passeth all understanding. It is described as illumination and enlightenment. It is rare in the human realm. Joy, 540. Love that is unconditional and unchanging despite circumstances and actions of others. The world is illuminated by exquisite beauty, which is seen in all things. The perfection of creation is self-evident. There is closeness to unity and discovery of self, compassion for all, enormous patience, the feeling of at oneness with others and a concern for their happiness. A sense of self-completion and self-sufficiency prevails. Love, 500. A way of being that is forgiving, nurturing, and supportive. It does not proceed from the mind, rather it emanates from the heart. Love focuses on the essence of a situation, not the details. It deals with wholes, not particulars. As perception is replaced with vision, it takes no position and sees the intrinsic value and lovability of all that exists. Reason, 400. This aspect differentiates humans from the animal world. There is the ability to see things in the abstract, to conceptualize, to be objective, and to make rapid and correct decisions. Its enormous utility is problem solving. Science, philosophy, medicine, and logic are expressions of this level. Acceptance, 350. This energy is easygoing, laid back, harmonious, flexible, inclusive, and free of inner resistance. Life is good. You and I are good. I feel connected. It meets life on life's terms. There is no need to blame others or blame life. Willingness, 310. This energy subserves survival by virtue of a positive attitude that welcomes all expressions of life. It is friendly, helpful, wants to assist, and seeks to be of service. Neutrality, 250. This is a way of life that is comfortable, pragmatic, and relatively free of emotionality. It's okay either way. It is free of rigid positions, non-judgmental, and non-competitive. Courage, 200. This energy says, I can do it. It is determined, excited about life, productive, independent, and self-empowered. Effective action is possible. Now we get below that level is getting into the force emotions, if you remember. Pride, 175. My way is the best way, says this level. Its focus is achievement, desire for recognition. Specialness and perfectionism. It feels better than, superior to others. Anger, 150. This energy overcomes the source of fear by force, threats, and attack. It is irritable, explosive, bitter, volatile, and resentful. It likes to get even, as in, I'll show you. Anger, 150. Oh, that's what I just read. Desire, 125. It is always seeking gain, acquisition, pleasure, and getting something outside oneself. It is insatiable, never satisfied, and craving. I have it. I have to have it. Give me what I want, and give it to me now. Fear, 100. This energy sees danger, which is everywhere. It is avoidant, defensive, preoccupied with security, possessive of others, jealous, restless, anxious, and vigilant. Grief, 75. There is helplessness, despair, loss, regret, and the feeling, if only I had. Separation, depression, sadness, being a loser. Mournful, as in I can't go on. Apathy, 50. This energy is characterized by hopelessness, playing dead, being a drain to others, being immobilized, and the feeling, I can't and who cares. Poverty is common. Guilt, 30. In this energy field, one wants to punish and be punished. It leads to self-rejection, masochism, remorse, feeling bad, and self-sabotage. It is all my fault. Accident proneness, suicidal behavior, and projection or self-hatred onto evil others are common. It is the basis of many psychosomatic illnesses. Finally, we have shame at 20, characterized by humiliation, as in hanging your head in shame. It is traditionally accompanied by banishment. It is destructive to health and leads to cruelty towards self and others. In general, we can say that the lower end of the scale is associated with lower vibrational frequencies. Lower energy, lower power, poorer life circumstances, poorer relationships, less abundance, less love, and poorer physical and emotional health. Because of the low energy, such needy people drain us on all levels. They tend to be avoided and find themselves surrounded by people on the same level, e.g., in jail. As we let go of negative feelings, there is progressive movement up the scale to courage and then beyond, with increasing effectiveness, success, and more effortless abundance. We tend to seek out such people. We say they are quote unquote high. They give off life energy to all living things around them. Animals are attracted to them. They have a green thumb and positively influence the lives of all with whom they come in contact. At the level of courage, the negative feelings have not all disappeared, but now we have sufficient energy to handle them because we've re-owned our power and self-adequacy. The fastest way to move from the bottom to the top is by telling the truth to ourselves and to others. The energy levels are also traditionally associated with the body energy centers that are sometimes referred to as chakras. The chakras are energy centers through which Kundalini energy is said to flow. Once it is awakened at the level of courage, 200. The energy centers, chakras, can be measured by a variety of clinical techniques and sensitive electronic instruments. On the map of consciousness, the chakras calibrate as follows: crown 600, third eye 525, throat 350, heart 505, solar plexus 275, sacral or spleen 275, base or root chakra 200. When we relinquish negative feelings, the energy in our higher chakras increases. For instance, instead of habitually venting our spleen, which is the second chakra, we are now described as all heart, fifth chakra. This energy system has a direct impact on the physical body. The energy in each chakra flows out through channels called meridians to the whole energy body, which is like a blueprint to the physical body. Each meridian is associated with a particular organ, and each organ is associated with a particular emotion. A negative emotion throws off the energy balance of its associated acupuncture meridian and related organ. For instance, depression, despair, and melancholy are associated with the liver meridian, so these emotions tend to interfere with liver function. Every negative feeling impairs a body organ, and as the years go by, that organ becomes diseased and eventually fails to function. Serious stuff. The lower our emotional state, the more negatively we influence not only our own lives, but also all of the life around us. The higher the emotional level of evolution, the more positive our life becomes on all levels, and we support our life around us. As negative emotions are acknowledged and surrendered, we get freer and move up the scale and eventually experiencing predominantly positive feelings. All lower emotions are limitations and blind us to the reality of our true self. As we surrender our way up the scale and near the top, a new type of experience begins to happen. At the very top of the scale, there occurs the realization of one's true self and the varying levels of illumination. The main importance of this is to note that as we get higher and freer, what the world calls spiritual awareness, intuition, and growth of consciousness occur. This is the common experience of all who surrender their negative feelings. They become more and more conscious. That which is impossible to see or experience at lower levels of consciousness becomes self-evident and stunningly obvious at higher levels. Excuse me. Understanding emotions. According to scientific findings, all thoughts are filed in the mind's memory bank under a filing system based upon the associated feeling and its finer gradation. That's Gray Laviolette, 1982. They are filed according to feeling tone, not fact. Consequently, there is a scientific basis for the observation that self-awareness is increased much more rapidly by observing feelings rather than thoughts. I'll say that again. Self-awareness is increased much more rapidly by observing feelings rather than thoughts. The thoughts associated with even one feeling may literally run into the thousands. The understanding of the underlying emotion and its correct handling is therefore more rewarding and less time-consuming than dealing with one's thoughts. In the beginning, if one is unfamiliar with the whole subject of feelings, it is often advisable to begin by merely observing them without any intention of doing anything about them. In this way, some clarification will occur about the relationship between the feelings and the thoughts. After there is more familiarity, some experimentation can then occur. For instance, certain areas of thoughts that tend to recur can be set aside and the feeling associated with them identified. The feeling can then be worked with by first accepting that it is there without resisting it or condemning it. And then one begins to empty out the energy of the feeling directly by letting it be what it is until it runs out. Somewhat later, the former thoughts can now be looked at, and their character will be observed to have changed. If the feeling has been totally surrendered and let go, usually all thoughts associated with it will have disappeared entirely and been replaced by a concluding thought which handles the matter quickly. For example, there was the case of a man who misplaced his passport shortly before going to a foreign country. Reminds me of that Adam Sandler song, Phone, Wallet, Keys. And then he adds phone, wallet, passport, keys. Anyway, as the scheduled, if you don't know what I'm talking about, don't worry about it. Otherwise, look up the Adam Sandler song, Phone, Wallet, Keys. As the scheduled date of departure drew closer and closer, his inner panic mounted. His mind raced wildly, trying to think where the passport could have been misplaced. He searched high and low. He tried various mental tricks to no avail. He berated himself. How could I have been so stupid as to lose a passport? Now there isn't time to get another one. As the fateful day approached, he faced a real dilemma. No passport, no trip. Missing the trip had a lot of negative consequences because it was both business and pleasure, and it would have created a difficult situation. Finally, he remembered to do the letting go technique. He sat down and asked himself, what is the basic feeling that I've been ignoring? To his surprise, the basic feeling that came up was grief. The grief was associated with not wanting to be separated from someone he dearly loved. There was also an associated fear of loss of the relationship, or at least the weakening of it due to his absence. As he let go of the grief and the associated fear, he suddenly felt at peace about the matter. He also concluded that if the relationship couldn't handle a 2-week absence, it wasn't worth all that much anyway. So there was really nothing at risk. As soon as he felt at peace, he instantly remembered where the passport was. In fact, it was in a place so simple and obvious that only unconscious blocking could explain why he had not remembered it. Needless to say, all the thousands of thoughts about the missing passport, the failed trip, and the potential consequences instantly disappeared. His emotional state became one of gratitude and happiness instead of frustration. Letting go can be very useful in everyday life situations, but its use in life crises can be crucial in preventing and alleviating large amounts of suffering. In a life crisis, there is usually an overwhelm of emotion. The crisis is tapped into one of our major areas of suppressed or repressed feelings. Remember that from the previous chapter. In this situation, the problem is not one of identifying the emotion, but how to handle the overwhelm. Handling emotional crisis. Because this is a very difficult problem for most people, some details are needed. There are several techniques to help move through emotional disaster much more quickly and with a better end result than allowing it to run out on its own. Recall the usual mechanisms that the mind consciously uses to handle emotions, which are suppression or repression, expression, and escape. Again, that's in the previous chapter that we read from. These are deleterious only when they are used without conscious intent. In an overwhelm, it is often advisable to utilize them, but doing so consciously. The purpose of this maneuver is to reduce the sheer overwhelming quantity of the emotion itself so that it can be disassembled and let go of in bits and pieces. This process is described below. Thus, in this case, it is all right consciously to push away as much of the emotion as we are capable of at the moment. The emotion can be reduced in intensity by sharing the feeling with close friends or mentors. I utilize this a lot, I have to say. I share a lot with close friends. By merely expressing the feeling, some of the energy behind it is reduced. It is also outright in the circumstance consciously to utilize escape mechanisms. Let me read that again. It is also all right, not outright. It is also all right in the circumstance consciously to utilize escape mechanisms, such as going out in a social situation to get some distance from the upset, playing with the dog, watching television, going to the movies, playing music, making love, or whatever one's habit is under circumstances. When the feeling has been reduced in its sheer quantity and intensity, it is best to start letting go of a small aspect of the situation rather than the overall situation and the accompanying emotion itself. To illustrate this point, let's take the example of a man who loses his job after many years with the company and is now in an overwhelm of despair. By utilizing the 3 mechanisms already described, some of the emotion can be reduced. When he can look at then are some of the small, what he can look at then are some of the small trivia about the job. For instance, could he let go of wanting to have lunch where he always had lunch with his business colleagues? Could he let go of wanting to park his car in the parking space he always had in the past? Could he let go of wanting to ride up in the same elevator? Could he let go of the attachment to the secretary and her friendliness toward him? Could he let go of the attachment to his computer? Could he let go of seeing the same boss every day? Could he let go of his feeling of familiarity with the background noises in the office? The purpose of surrendering these smaller aspects of losing a job, which may seem trivial, is that it gets the mind into the letting go mode. The letting go mode takes us up to the level of courage. The negative feelings have been acknowledged and worked through. Consequently, they've lost their charge. Suddenly, there is the awareness that we have the courage to face the situation, recognize our feelings, and do something about them. As the trivia are surrendered, curiously, the main event becomes less and less oppressive. The reason for the phenomenon is that when we use the mechanism of surrender on one emotion, we are surrendering on all emotions at the same time. It is as though all emotions have the same underlying energy, so that to surrender in one direction surrenders feelings which appear on the surface to be in the opposite direction. This is a matter of clinical experience. It must be tried personally in order to believe it. Seeing is believing, and trying is believing. After utilizing the above four methods, suppression, expression, escape, surrender of smaller aspects, a fifth now becomes apparent. Every strong emotion is really a composite of a number of subsidiary emotions, and the total emotional complex can be disassembled. Thus, for instance, the man who has lost his job initially has an overwhelming feeling of despair. But as he begins to surrender around the periphery, and as he diminishes his overwhelm through consciously utilizing escape, suppression, and expression, he now realizes that there is also anger. He sees that the anger is associated with pride. There is a lot of anger in the form of resentment. There is self-invalidation, which is a form of anger expressed against himself. There is also considerable fear. Thus, these associated emotions can now be addressed directly. For instance, he can start letting go of the fear that he won't find another job. When that fear is acknowledged and let go, all the alternate possibilities that exist will become suddenly apparent to him. And as he surrenders pride, he will quickly see that he is not faced with economic disaster as he had thought. Thus, as the disassembled emotional complex is taken apart into its component parts, each component part now has less energy and can be surrendered individually. As we come out of the overwhelm, it will be remembered that a certain portion of the emotion was purposely suppressed or escaped. It can now be re-examined so that it is no longer doing, or so that it no longer does residual harm, such as ending up in bitterness, unconscious guilt, or lower self-esteem. Fragments of the emotional complex may recur for a period of time, even years. However, because they are now small fragments, each can be handled as it arises. At least the crisis situation will have been passed through safely and consciously. Handling a crisis from the emotional rather than the intellectual level will shorten its duration dramatically. In the case of someone who loses a job, handling it from the intellectual level will produce thousands of thoughts and hypothetical scenarios. The person suffers through many sleepless nights due to the racing thoughts about the situation as the mind reviews it over and over again. All of this is fruitless. Until the underlying emotion is surrendered, the thoughts will be engendered endlessly. We all know of people who have had an emotional crisis many years ago and to this day have not recovered. It has totally colored their life, and they have paid a big price for their lack of know-how in handling the underlying emotions. There are numerous benefits to handling a life crisis successfully. For one thing, the amount of suppressed or repressed emotion is now much less. The crisis has forced it up to be relinquished, and therefore the amount that is left in the reservoir is much less. This reminds me of Michael Singer, who I talk about a lot in his book Letting Go and other books, talks about the emotions coming up. The more you let go, the more emotions that are coming up and being let go of, the less there's going to be in the tank, so to speak. Singer refers to that as samskara, those negative emotions. So there's a lot of overlap, as I've talked about in the previous videos. There is a greater feeling of self-esteem and confidence because there is the awareness that one can survive and handle whatever life will bring. There is an overall reduction of the fear of life, a greater feeling of mastery, greater compassion for the suffering of others, and increased ability to help them through similar circumstances. I know after my divorce, after doing a lot of work, and the work is still ongoing, of course, but I was in a better position to be able to help others who had gone through it as well. Paradoxically, after a life crisis, such as divorce, and there's obviously many other crises that one can pinpoint in their own particular life, unfortunately. So after a life crisis, there often is a period of variable duration of peace and calmness, sometimes approaching the level of mystical experience. The dark night of the soul frequently precedes states of heightened awareness. One of the best known examples of this paradox is illustrated by persons who have had near-death experiences. There are now many books on the subject which reveal a certain commonality. Once the worst of all possible fears, the dread and shock of death, has been faced, it is superseded by a profound sense of serenity, peace, oneness, and immunity from fear. Again, I know for me, in a very large part, a big chunk of the fears that I used to carry around after I got divorced vanished. I tell that to a lot of my friends and colleagues. Well, now I can somewhat explain it based on this book. I used to say I can't explain it, but I know for myself, fear, that's again, it's not to say I'm perfect and flawless and never have fear, but I was definitely a much more fearful person prior to that crisis than after. Many such persons develop extraordinary abilities, become healers, develop psychic awareness, and advanced states of spiritual illumination. They experience major leaps in growth and the sudden appearance of new talents and capabilities, or capacities, he says here. Thus, every life crisis carries with it the kernels of a reversal, a renewal, an expansion, a leap in consciousness, and a letting go of the old and a birth of the new. Healing the past. When we look at our lives, we will see the residual of past life crises which are still unresolved. Again, Singer would refer to that as a samskara. Samskara, samskara. Thoughts and feelings about the events tend to occur and color our perception, and we will note that they have disabled us in certain areas of life. At that point, it is wise to ask ourselves if it is worth paying the continuing cost. Now that we have some mechanisms by which to handle these residuals, they can be uncovered. The residual feelings can be investigated and let go of so that a healing can take place. This brings us to another emotional healing technique that becomes powerful once the major event has passed. That is to place the event in a different context, to see it from a different perspective, and to hold it in a different paradigm with a different significance and meaning. It is said that most people spend their lives regretting the past and fearing the future. Therefore, they are unable to experience joy in the present. Many of us have assumed that this is our human fate, our lot, and the best that we can do is grin and bear it. Philosophers have sometimes made hay out of this negativism, pessimistic approach, and developed whole systems of nihilism. These philosophers, some of whom have become celebrated over the years, are obviously mere victims of painful emotions that they did not handle, which triggered endless intellectualization and elaboration. Some spent their entire lifetime constructing sophisticated intellectual systems to justify what is glaringly obvious as a simple suppressed emotion. One of the most effective tools for handling the past is the creation of a different context, different narrative, different story. I added that part about the narrative and story, but Hawkins says a different context. What this means is that we give it a different meaning. We take on a different attitude about the past difficulty or trauma. We acknowledge the hidden gift in it. The value of this technique was first recognized in psychiatry by Viktor Frankl. He explained the approach, which he called logotherapy, in his famous book, Man's Search for Meaning. And I have that book on my shelf over here out of the video. His clinical and personal, I believe I do. His clinical and personal experience demonstrated that emotional events and traumatic occurrences will change considerably and be healed if a new meaning is placed around them. Frankl told of his own experience in the Nazi concentration camps, wherein he came to see his physical and psychic suffering as an opportunity to achieve inner triumph. Everything can be taken from man, but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one own way. That's Frankl, 1959, again revised 2006. There's probably later editions as well. Frankl recontextualized the horrific circumstances to hold profound meaning for the human spirit. Every life experience, no matter how tragic, contains a hidden lesson. When we discover and acknowledge the hidden gift that is there, a healing takes place. In the example of a man who lost his job, after some time had passed, he looked back and saw that his former job was stunting, that he had been in a rut. Frankly, the job had given him an ulcer. Prior to losing the job, he had seen only the pleasures from it. Once outside of the situation, he began to see the costs that he'd been paying, physically, mentally, and emotionally. After losing the job, he was open to discovering new possibilities and new talents. In fact, he began a new, more promising career. So life events are opportunities to grow, expand, experience, and develop. In some cases, it seems in retrospect that there was actually this unconscious purpose behind the event, as though our unconscious knew that something important had to be learned, and painful as it was the only way it could be brought into experience. This is part of the psychology of the psychoanalyst Carl Jung, who concluded after a lifetime of study that there is an inborn drive in the unconscious toward wholeness, completeness, and realization of the self, and that the unconscious will devise the ways and means of bringing this about, even if they are traumatic to the conscious mind. Powerful stuff. Jung also, and I've heard this before, and I definitely relate to it, and it's not a surprise that one of the masters, Hawkins, is talking about this as well. Jung also said that in the unconscious, there was an aspect of ourselves called the shadow. The shadow is all the repressed thoughts, feelings, and concepts about ourselves that we do not want to face. One benefit of a crisis is that it often brings us into familiarity with our shadow. It makes us more human and more whole to realize that we share with all of humanity. All the stuff that we thought they were guilty of is equally in ourselves. Thus, when it is brought up to conscious awareness, acknowledged, and surrendered, It is no longer unconsciously running us. It no longer unconsciously runs us. Once the shadow has been acknowledged, it loses its power. All that is necessary is merely to recognize that we have certain forbidden impulses, thoughts, and feelings. Now they can be handled with a "so what?" Passing through a life crisis, I love that. Passing through a life crisis then makes us more human, more compassionate, more accepting and understanding of ourselves and others. We no longer have to indulge in making others wrong or making ourselves wrong. Handling an emotional crisis leads to greater wisdom and results in lifetime benefits. Fear of life is really the fear of emotions. It is not the facts that we fear, but our feelings about them. Once we have mastery over our feelings, our fear of life diminishes. We feel a greater self-confidence, and we are willing to take greater chances because we now feel that we can handle the emotional consequences, whatever they might be. Because fear is the basis of all inhibitions, mastery over fear means the unblocking of whole adventures of life experience that previously had been avoided. Thus, the man who successfully handles the crisis of losing a job will never again experience the same fear. He will therefore be more creative on the next job, willing to take the necessary risks to make it a success. He begins to see how the haunting fear of job loss had severely limited his performance in the past, made him fearful and cautious, and cost him his self-esteem due to his no-towing and compliance with his superiors. One benefit from a life crisis is greater self-awareness. The situation is overwhelming, and we are forced to stop all our divisionary games, take a good look at our life situation, and reevaluate our beliefs, goals, values, and life direction. Excuse me. It is an opportunity to reevaluate and let go of guilt. It also is an opportunity for a total shift in attitude. Life crises, as we pass through them, confront us with the polar opposites. Shall we hate or forgive that person? Shall we learn from this experience and grow, or resent it and become bitter? Do we choose to overlook the other person's shortcomings and our own, or instead do we resent and mentally attack them? Shall we withdraw from a similar situation in the future with greater fear, or shall we transcend this crisis and master it once and for all? Do we choose hope or discouragement? Can we use the experience as an opportunity to learn how to share, or shall we withdraw into a shell of fear and bitterness? Every emotional experience is an opportunity to go up or down. Which do we choose? That is the confrontation. We have the opportunity to choose whether we want to hang on or let go of emotional upsets. We can look at the cost of hanging on to them. Do we want to pay the price? Are we willing to accept the feelings? We can look at the benefits of letting go of them. The choice we make will determine our future. What kind of a future do we want? Will we choose to be healed, or will we become one of the walking wounded? In making this choice, it is well to look at the payoff we get from hanging on to the residuals of a painful experience. What are the satisfactions we are getting? Hatred, self-pity, resentments, they all have their cheap little payoff, that little inner satisfaction. Let's not pretend that it is not there. There is a weird, quirky pleasure when we hang on to pain. Excuse me. It certainly satisfies our unconscious need for alleviation of guilt through punishment. We get to feel miserable and rotten. The question then arises, but for how long? Take, for example, a man who had not spoken to his brother for 23 years. Neither of them could remember what the incident was about. It had long been forgotten. But they were in the habit of not speaking, and so for 23 years, they paid the price of missing each other's company, affection, togetherness in family matters, and all the shared experiences and love they could have had. When the man learned about the mechanism of surrender, he began to let go of the feelings about his brother. Suddenly, he broke out in tears of grief, realizing all that had been lost over the years. By forgiving his brother, he triggered a similar response in the brother, and the two were reunited. Then one of the brothers flashed back on the incident. It had been an argument over a pair of tennis shoes. It had been an argument over a pair of tennis shoes. I just read that twice. I guess I was meant to for emphasis. I wasn't trying to. Over one pair of tennis shoes, they had paid a price extending over 23 years. Had the man not learned the technique of letting go, he might well have gone to his grave with the same resentment. So the question is, how long do we want to go on suffering? When are we willing to give it up? When is enough enough? The part of us that wants to cling to negative emotions is our smallness. It is the part of us that is mean, petty, selfish, competitive, cheap, conniving, mistrusting, vindictive, judgmental, diminished, weak, guilty, ashamed, and vain. It has little energy. It is depleting, demeaning, and leads us to lowering of self-respect. It is the small part of us that accounts for our own self-hatred, unending guilt, and seeking for punishment, sickness, and disease. It is that part which we is it that part which we want to identify? Is it that part we want to energize? Is that the way we want to see ourselves? Because if that's the way we see ourselves, that's the way others will see us. The world can only see us as we see ourselves. Are we willing to pay those consequences? If we see ourselves as cheap and petty, it's unlikely that we'll be at the top of the company list for a raise. The price of holding on to smallness can be demonstrated with muscle testing. The procedure is fairly simple. Hawkins 95 and 2812. Hold in mind a mean, petty thought and have someone press down on your arm while you resist. Notice the effect. Now choose the exact opposite view. Picture yourself as being generous, forgiving, loving, and experiencing your inner greatness. Instantly, there will be an enormous increase in muscle strength, indicating a surge of positive bioenergy. Smallness brings weakness, sickness, disease, and death. Do you really want that? Letting go of negative feelings can be accompanied by another very healthy maneuver which will greatly assist your inner transformation, and that is to stop resisting the positive emotions, enhancing positive emotions. The corollary to letting go of negative feelings is to stop resisting the positive ones. Everything in the universe has its opposite. Therefore, in the mind, every negative feeling has its counterpart between smallness and greatness, whether we are constantly aware of its existence at any given moment or not. A good and very illuminating exercise is to sit down and look at the feeling that is directly opposite the negative one that we are experiencing and begin to let go, resisting it. Let's say, for instance, that a friend's birthday is coming up and we are feeling resentful and stingy. Therefore, we just can't seem to get out and shop for a present, and the day is getting closer. The exact opposite feelings are those of forgiveness and generosity. We just start looking for the feeling of forgiveness within ourselves and stop resisting it. As we keep letting go of our resistance to being a forgiving person, it is often surprising that it will come up with a surge. We will begin to recognize that part of our nature has always been willing and wanting to forgive, but we didn't dare chance it. We thought we might appear foolish. We thought we were punishing the other person by holding the resentment, but we have actually been suppressing love. We're actually punishing ourselves. I added that part. In the beginning, we may not consciously feel this specifically about our friend, but we will begin to notice that we do have this aspect of our personality. As we keep surrendering our resistance to love, we will notice that within ourselves there is something that wants to express itself through sharing and giving, letting the past go and burying the hatchet. There is a desire to make a friendly gesture. We want to heal the separation, to repair the wound, to make good the wrong, to express gratitude, and to take a chance on being thought a fool. The purpose of this exercise is to locate within ourselves that which can only be described as greatness. Greatness is the courage to overcome obstacles. It is the willingness to move to a higher level of love. It is the acceptance of others' humanness and having compassion for their suffering by putting ourselves in their shoes. Out of forgiveness of others comes self-forgiveness and the relief of guilt. The real payoff we get is when we let go of our negativity and choose to be loving. We are the ones who benefit. We are the ones who gain from the real payoff. With this increased awareness of who we really are comes the progressive invulnerability to pain. Once we compassionately accept our own humanness and that of others, we are no longer subject to humiliation, for true humility is a part of greatness. Out of the recognition of who we really are comes the desire to seek that which is uplifting. Out of it arises a new meaning and context for life. When that inner emptiness due to lack of self-worth is replaced by true self-love, self-respect, and esteem, we no longer have to seek it in the world. For that source of happiness is within ourselves. How many times have we heard that? It dawns on us that it cannot be supplied by the world anyway. No amount of riches can compensate for an inner feeling of poverty. We all know of the many multimillionaires who try to compensate for their inner sense of hollowness and lack of inner self-worth. Once we have contacted this inner self, this inner greatness, this inner completion, contentment, and true sense of happiness, we have transcended the world. The world is now a place to enjoy, and we are no longer run by it. We are no longer at the effect of it. When we utilize these techniques of relinquishing the negative and surrendering resistance to the positive, sooner or later we come into a sudden, comprehensive awareness of our true dimension. Once this has been experienced, it will never be forgotten. The world will never intimidate us again as it once did. There may be continued compliance with the ways of the world out of sheer habit, but the inner driveness, the inner vulnerability, and the inner doubt is now gone. Outwardly, the behavior may appear the same, but inwardly, the causes for it are now totally different. The end result of the conscious handling of emotions is invulnerability and imperturbability. Our inner nature is now bulletproof. We are able to go through life with balance and grace. And that concludes chapter 3. If you made it through all the way, congratulations and good stuff. I'm impressed. Now we're just going to do I'll do my best to do a very brief summary of some of the main takeaways and insights that I found to be contained in this chapter. Simplicity is one of the earmarks of truth, Hawkins says. And that's important because this indeed is a simple method, as Hawkins mentioned in the last chapter. The primary human goal is survival. The mind is a survival mechanism. Its main tool is reason, and that's to achieve the emotional ends. In fact, it is the underlying emotion that brings about oftentimes even millions of thoughts. And you can sort of get to that underlying emotion underneath all the thoughts by keeping to ask, what for? There are different levels of consciousness. Lower levels vibrate at a lower vibration and are reductive, whereas higher levels, such as courage and acceptance, etc., vibrate obviously on a higher level and represent abundance, expansiveness, etc. The fastest way up the level of consciousness is to tell the truth to ourselves and to others. Because thoughts are filed by feelings, not by facts, therefore self-awareness is increased more rapidly by observing your feelings rather than your thoughts. Accepting feelings without condemning or judging them allows one to let go of the energy from under them. Mechanisms such as suppression and expression and repression, like we talked about in the previous video, in the previous chapter, that you actually can handle constructively and consciously in order to help yourself continue to let go of an emotional crisis. An example that Hawkins used, and which I use as well, is to share your feelings with others. You can work on surrendering and letting go of smaller aspects within an event. Michael Singer, I didn't mention this earlier, but Michael Singer in his book, Living Untethered, would refer to that as capturing the low-hanging fruit. Work on the smaller aspects first and then get to the big stuff. Fragments may arise after the smaller ones are dealt with, and that's okay because that's the way of you being able to work through all the emotional components to an event. And I refer to Michael Singer referring to that as samskaras. Samskara. Every life crisis carries within it the kernels of a reversal, a renewal, an improvement of consciousness. An effective tool for handling a traumatic event is to create a different context for it, to have a different narrative or a different story surrounding it. For example, if you look at something as being a blessing in disguise, that will help you frame it in a different context of how you were framing it up until now. And to illustrate this, Hawkins referred to the landmark book by Dr. Viktor Frankl of logotherapy in Man's Search for Meaning. Okay, you can find a greater purpose in something which may be hidden beneath the surface, but it's definitely there. Our unconscious knows that there's something important to be learned, and it will find a way to bring it about, even if it's brought about in a painful and traumatic way. Hawkins also talks about the idea of shadow and approaching one's shadow, as Carl Jung talks about. Passing through a life crisis makes us more human and compassionate for ourselves and for others. It gives us greater wisdom. A huge benefit to a life crisis is greater self-awareness. It's a shift in attitude and a transcendence of oneself. We make a choice. Do we want to hang on to the hurt, to the pain, to the suffering? Are those cheap little payoffs worth it? Are we really punishing somebody else, or are we really punishing ourselves? Do we benefit from accepting and letting go? I would add over here that I've read a lot of Tony Robbins' books, and he talks about the pain-pleasure relationship, right? What is the price versus, or what is the pain associated with something versus what is the pleasure of not doing it or doing something, right? So for example, losing weight. You gain a tremendous amount of pleasure from being in shape, and is that pleasure worth losing as a result of having that ice cream sundae? So examples like that, and Hawkins is kind of alluding to that here. Do we really want to hang on to that cheap little payoff, or do we want to have the benefit that comes with letting go? I think the answer is obvious. By the way, if you fail or if there's a fall, Hawkins himself would say, don't judge yourself, don't blame yourself, just notice it and then let go of that feeling of guilt or that feeling of blame as well. Okay, so don't beat yourself up if you do have a fall. We're human beings, we're all going to have falls. As Hawkins also said in this chapter, I don't know if he said nobody or very few, if any, I guess the greats, the masters, ever reached the level of absolute enlightenment. Hawkins talks about examining the positive emotions that are directly opposite the negative emotions and then learning to let go of the resistance to that. So for example, if you want to buy somebody a gift, but you're remembering that that person didn't buy you a gift, so you'll have resentment for that person not buying you a gift, but the absolute opposite of that could be generosity and kindness of spirit. And then you can look at yourself and ask yourself, why don't I want to do that? Why do I want to hold on to the resentment? And then you can let go of that resistance to actually being that kind and generous person that you want to be. Very interesting. Greatness is the courage to overcome obstacles, the willingness to go to a higher level of love, accepting the humanness of ourselves and others. And we are the ones who most benefit, Hawkins says. The source of happiness is within ourselves. We've heard that theme a lot. And finally, the end result of conscious handling of emotions is an invulnerability and an imperturbability. I love that word, imperturbability. One cannot be perturbed. We become bulletproof. That ends the summary of this chapter. I know there was a lot. There's a lot to process. There's a lot to review. That's why it's so important to always review these books, review these chapters. I know I've done it many times. And the beauty of having this recorded on YouTube is that you can review it while you work or do your other chores as much as you want. I do hope you found this video to be helpful and informative and insightful, whether it's Hawkins' insights, which are obviously the most insightful, or mine as well. I hope you found mine to be insightful. I would love to get your feedback. If you have any comments or questions, leave that in the section below for that purpose. Don't forget to hit the like button and also to subscribe. Thank you to all those who did. But if you haven't yet, please take one more second. I know you've taken a lot of seconds to watch or listen to this video, but one more to hit that subscribe button and the notification bell. And that way you won't miss the next video in this series and any other videos that I have on my channel. And in the meantime, I will go about my business of preparing for the next video, which will be chapter 4, video 5. And I do hope you'll join me there. And if you haven't watched the previous videos, don't forget to watch those so that you'll be even more informed and equipped to watch the next video in this series, which will be chapter 5. Thanks once again for watching and or listening, and I look forward to seeing you at the next video. Hey, thanks for watching. I know your time is valuable, and that's one of the many reasons I'm grateful that you watched my video. Check out the next video in this series or in my library. Don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and the notification bell so that you don't miss a future video. And it will also help me to continue producing videos just like this one. I appreciate it.